set up the Facebook stream.
Well, good morning, evening, afternoon, as may be the case for any of you. Nice to be with you. Nothing too much out of the ordinary this week for myself here and my staff at Audaria, although we were dragged a little bit into a controversy regarding the nature of bhakti in terms of whether it's inherent in the jiva or not. Some devotees seemed adamant that it was not, that it was inherent in the jiva, and they attacked Padmanabh Maharaj, which served to give publicity to his forthcoming book. It retires the opposition entirely, but that was a little exciting and a little disappointing to see how persons can be attached and emotionally charged over an issue to the point that they can't discuss it dispassionately and rationally and so forth. There was some of the opposition was a couple of followers of Narayan Maharaj who had taken sannyas from him and are separated from the main their main group as well. It's a pity, but as I say, I think it served as some publicity for Maharaj's book, so that's good.
Yeah, no, that's great. When bad is good. All right.
So what about questions?
Yeah, so far we have 4 questions, but there's always
Chance for more.
devotees that put stuff in the chat and it will grow. I'm sure we'll probably get a few more questions. So to start with, we have Sumati right here that has a question.
Hare
Okay.
Krishna, Guru Maharaj. So we're always being taught to accept Krishna as our only maintainer and protector. And Draupadi is usually given as an example of one who, fully called out and cried to Krishna for help when she was in the assembly of the Kurus and they were trying to disrobe her. And then there's also the residents of Braj when Indra sent the Shambhataka clouds to destroy Govardhan and all the residents of Braj. So they all called out to Krishna to help them. Then at the same time, I've read where a devotee doesn't ask Krishna for help. You shouldn't ask Krishna for help. So I was wondering if you could comment on those.
Yes, Gopritve Varanam Tata. This is one of the limbs of Sharanagati. There are 6 limbs to what constitutes Sharanagati or surrender. Sharanagati is a major aspect of the Ramanuja Sampradaya. It's thought only certain qualified people can practice bhakti yoga who have gone through karma and gyan, but ordinary people can do Sharanagati and attain Vaikuntha. In our Sampradaya, Sharanagati is thought to be an anga, a limb of bhakti. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur emphasized Sharanagati, wrote many poems about it and so forth. He also very insightfully explained Sharanagati to be the outer expression of one's inner faith, which is the driving force in one sense, initial force in one's beginning the path of bhakti. So within Sharanagati, go Prithvi Varanam Tatat, thinking that Krishna is my maintainer, is one of the angas, and it's the central anga. So it's thought to be the Swarup Lakshan, or the primary characteristic of Sharanagati, the others being marginal or secondary, supportive, so to speak. The Govardhan Leela that you mentioned is a nice example of how the Premikas of Braj demonstrate their Sharanagati by taking shelter of Krishna at the time when there wasn't much else they could do. So I think that it's important also to bring into the conversation or the discussion, the answer, the English adage, God helps him who helps himself. Now, how does that work in relation to, we should think only Krishna as our maintainer? So I think that what we see in the lives of great devotees is how to apply certain theoretical positions that we find in the philosophy. And we find that they make endeavor to one extent or another to provide for themselves and not ask God, if you will, to provide for them. And then they don't, should they not acquire something or less than might be desired, they're resolved to live with that this is the result, that Krishna is providing only this much. I made this effort. I thought this was reasonable. This is what he provided. I live with it, and my ability to practice sadhana is not inhibited by that. In fact, there may be an impetus from it, from getting less or having to change my situation, and so on and so forth. So instead of fighting back against the current, so to speak, I think there's a place to harmonize these two ideas. If something comes to mind as we speak about this, kind of along these lines, it's kind of funny, but Prabhupada used to say, what, some old man comes to Vrindavan to surrender to Krishna. And he gives all his money to his family and everything, and just comes to Vrindavan. And Prabhupada said to Krishna, says, where's your money? Oh, I gave it to my family, to my kids. And you come here and expect me to take care of you? And you gave all your money to them? So Prabhupada commented in a humorous way along those lines. I mean, you can think the money was provided by Krishna ultimately anyway, so it's his, should be given to him. So I think there's some place for making a reasonable effort to maintain oneself and not being outside of the principle of depending on Krishna for my maintenance. In other words, what I get, I'll accept that. That Krishna has provided that. Not that I do nothing. And Krishna will come and feed me. And so now, if you can sit like Madhavendra Puri and just chant all day long, then it's possible that Krishna will come personally. He told Madhavendra Puri that, here I'm bringing you some milk. And who are you? I live here. This is my neighborhood and my property. And some people, they grow food. Some people only beg food. And some people, like you, they're living on the chanting, but I think you need to eat, so I bring them food. So look at that example. Some people grow food. Okay, that's your typical householder in an agrarian culture. So there's a place for that, and still being a Sharanagata. I planted the seeds, I watered the crops, I did everything, and this is the yield we got. Or it didn't rain this year much, we got a smaller yield. We live with less. This is what Krishna provided. Go to the next level, you have a Nirapeksha, a renunciate, who is not growing food, but he's begging. So is he not a Sharanagata? Is he not depending on Krishna for his maintenance? If he is, why is he begging? No, he's begging whatever comes. He accepts that so he's made an effort. God helps him, who helps himself. He's made effort, and Krishna's responding and accepts accordingly. Some days he may get nothing. Some days he may get a feast, but he has to go out and do the begging. Then some people may forget about eating. Nidrahara vihara kari vijito sankhya-purvaka nama gananatibihi. It's said by Srinivas Acharya about the Goswamis. They forgot to eat and sleep. They chanted regularly their prescribed number of rounds and so forth. Or again, you go to the example of Madhavendra Puri. So there's the superlative status. And Krishna's coming and bringing him milk, right? So if you enter into Goloka, well, you don't have to work. Krishna's maintaining everyone there. Still, people are busy, right? In so many ways, all related to his service, of course. So, so that's related to your question, but directly your question is, well, we're supposed to depend on Krishna. We're not supposed to ask Krishna for anything. I think that there is a place for asking Krishna for anything and everything. Whatever you want, better to ask Krishna than anybody else. You may be asking someone who could give much more than what you ask for and be a little foolish, but at least you approached Krishna. And as I often say, if we develop the tendency to approach Krishna and depend upon him, ask him to support us, that what we're really getting is the tendency to take shelter of Krishna. So I think there's a place for that. And, I think also devotees like yourself, you want to have it just basically what you need to do your spiritual practice, especially at your age and so forth. And ask Krishna to provide you, for example, a situation that's suitable that you can remember him and not be distracted by. That's perfectly reasonable and not outside of the boundaries of being a Sharanagata. If he doesn't, or whatever he does, then provide. Well, we'll go with that. Does that help?
Yes, thank you so much.
Okay.
Shama Sundar, the next question is Govinda Dasi. She has a question, so if you could. Okay. Gurmaj, you'll need to, you'll need to repeat the question in English for the devotees who are on Facebook. If you,
Hmm. Okay, well, yeah, the question seems to be about Pratishta and the implications of Pratishta. And to be quite honest, it's not entirely clear what the question is there. Yeah, she seems to be asking also that sometimes she says Pratishta is confused with mercy. I'm not sure what that means. Maybe she means that you get a position within a sangha, which is mercy, but it could be lend itself to Pratishta or something like that. So it's not entirely clear to me exactly what the question is, but Pratishta is of course it means self-pride and the desire for self-aggrandizement. No. Uh-huh.
Oh, no.
The desire for self-aggrandizement to bring attention to oneself. This is very much, I would say, kind of central to our material conditioning. And so it's difficult to uproot. I think maybe perhaps Bhaktivinoda has thought of it as that from which all other anarthas, arise, something to that effect. I think he may have said that somewhere. I believe in his Manasiksha, Rabindranath Das Goswami calls out Pratishta and refers to it as the stool of a pig. The implication being that pigs eat stool, what their stool must be like. So how undesirable it is to want to draw attention to oneself, and it's also thought to be, in one sense, something that can arise in the context of bhakti, just as weeds can arise when you're watering a plant. So when you're watering through practice, the vine of bhakti, if you will, it's possible that the weed of Pratishta can grow along with it and then be misidentified by the practitioner with the creeper of bhakti. And then you've got, that's a real problem. So we may think, someone may think the goal is to become the temple president, to become the best kirtaneer. And bring attention, to oneself, or get some sense of fulfillment from that. That others think I'm a great singer, others think I'm the best mridanga player, or I'm the best speaker, writer, whatever may be the case. And you can ride on those waves, if you will, and misidentify that with the bhakti creeper itself. So that needs to be uprooted. And, it's a formidable task, as I said in the beginning, given that it's our material existence is so kind of rooted in a sense, wanting to be or thinking of oneself as the center. it's not that people go around all day long thinking I'm the center, but we have a sense that I exist, and then the world is moving around me. Obviously, we know there are other forces and so forth, but still, we see everything from our vantage point and so on. So we're very, I want to say, self-centered, and that's the opposite of being, Krishna-centered. So the self-centeredness that is basic to or central to material conditioning, obviously in the human form of life, lends itself to this false pride. So looking at it like that, as I say, it's a very deep-rooted issue, and difficult to uproot, and therefore considerable emphasis has been placed on it to identify it and not misidentify it for bhakti, to see yourself doing so because you've read the text and it says this can happen, and then check yourself and so forth. So given the question, I'm not exactly sure if there's a specific question or you just want me to talk about Pratishtha in general. I've tried to do that here a little bit. I hope that's helpful. If there's a further point that you want me to address that hasn't been that well articulated by yourself, but nonetheless you would like me to, you can ask further or post a comment, and I'll try to address it. Okay. Next question.
Okay, Eric?
Dandavat pranams. Good morning, Maharaj. Nice to see you.
Morning.
So my question is regarding some statements I remember from reading your edition of Tattva Sandarbha. So there was a passage where you said, no sound can exist outside of the sky. Similarly, no knowledge or shabda can be experienced outside of that which manifests in the mind of Vyas, the Veda. To appreciate this, one must study the Vedas, wherein one will find that even the modern conveniences of our high-tech times are discussed therein, albeit in different terms and brought about by different means. So I was a bit confused after reading this, as I've also heard you mention in other instances that the Vedic literature is couched in and presented in a particular time and circumstance, and therefore has some relativity to it, that it doesn't necessarily literally present all knowledge of everything about, like, for example, material topics of history, material science, etc., but that through the understandings and language of the time, the ultimate essence of all knowledge, or knowledge about Krishna, is revealed. And after coming to know that, one feels that there's nothing more that needs to be known. So kind of in relation to this, I think I also heard you say something about something along the lines of, they were not very concerned about what is the nature of the natural world. So they spoke about it in ways that appear to us in modern times as if they were uninformed about the natural world. They only saw the natural world as useful in terms of how you could interact with it or think about it in such that it would foster understanding of the subjective world or consciousness. So could you please clarify and harmonize these statements that I've heard? Thank you.
Yes, I think that the statement in the Tattva Sandarbha that you referred to, that in a way seems to contradict other things that I've said, is talking in a more broad way about the Eastern revelation comparatively, for example, to other forms of revelation, the Western Christian or Abrahamic revelations. in that in a broader sense, the texts, yes, they don't give every detail, but they speak, for example, of much longer periods of time, than 6,000 years, or they talk about inflating and or expanding and contracting universes, cyclical time, in broad terms, poetic terms often, but in ways that do correspond, interestingly, to findings, thoughts, objective observances in modern science about the nature of the world. They don't go into detail about everything, but as far as a body of revelation goes, this is one thing you'll find in the sky of the mind of Vyas, if you will, that you won't find in other forms of revelation. And there are any number of people in astrophysics or other fields of modern science that would acknowledge that, to some extent, yes, that's the case, comparatively. So it's not that everything's there, but there's something can be said that a comprehensive idea about the nature of existence is found there that does include some material details compared to, you're not going to find them in the Bible. You're not going to find them in the Quran or the Lotus Sutra of the Buddhists. While you might find some things in some Native American texts about the nature of the world, they don't conform in a way that ideas found in the Vedic text, the Eastern Revelation do. So something along those lines. Does that help?
Yes, thank you very much, Maharaj.
Okay, Indra has a couple questions in the chat. I'm going to let her unmute herself and ask her questions.
Hare Krishna. Yeah, I have a follow-up question from what Govinda Dasi was asking, talking about Pratishta. There's something called the Prana Pratishta ceremony. So I was always wondering about why is it called that?
Well, Pratishta means like standing. So let's look. You want to have standing. You want to have a position. So to bring the pran into the deity, that's what pran pratishta is. To bring the deity to life, to give him some standing. It's a different use of the word. Pratishta can mean pride, but it doesn't mean pride in the context of the pran pratishta ceremony. We're not, of course, we're bringing attention to Krishna. You could look at it like that. That should be done.
Cool, thank you. And I have a second question. May I?
Yeah.
Okay. So that was just like recently, like a devotee friend of mine, she said, oh yeah, and I have this tulsi, really beautiful. And she's picking the leaves and then she adds, well, she offers them to Krishna and then she adds it to her own like herbal infusion. And so some of us were like, no, don't do this. And others were saying, well, as long as they're offered, it's okay. It's different when you just buy tulsi tea from like the store, which is, well, kind of terrible. But I was just wondering, like, is it okay the way she's doing it, or shouldn't you be just not doing this at all? What's your
Well, tulsi has
opinion?
many purposes. Some say she has medicinal qualities and so forth. I don't know if that's true or not, or to what extent. But I wouldn't fault her for that. I wouldn't fault her from that. Yeah, I don't see any harm. Simple answer.
Okay, thank you. That helps.
Okay.
Okay. Guru Maharaj, I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. It's from, I was listening to a recent talk from Padmanabha Swami, and he was talking about Madhavendra Puri, and someone had asked what his identity was in Krishna Leela. And Maharaj had responded that some texts say that he is a Kalpavriksha tree. So I would very much like to hear what you have to say, because I've asked questions before about the Dambasis, the trees, and you've talked about it, more of it being expansion of Balaram's potency, the Sandini potency. And so anyway, if you could speak on that.
Well, I'd like to say that it's not that I don't think that the identities of the devotees of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, in terms of their Braja Leela Swarups, the identification, this one is that one, and so forth, is that hard and fast, if you will, or that literal, as some devotees take it. If you look at the principal book in which those identities are made, Kavi Karnapur makes it very clear that he gathered his opinion from hearing from different devotees and researching different texts and Puranas and so forth, and that there are different opinions about the same person, and he doesn't have a problem, with that. The general idea, though, is that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Krishna is coming with his associates. That's the general idea. And some of them may be more precise, and there may be, let's say, more praman, more evidence in support of than others. I mean, I don't know, what can you say? Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Chaitanya Charitamrita said Ramananda Roy is Arjun.
Right.
So other people said other things. Well, could be a better source than Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. But then what did he mean when he said it? Was he saying it, in a definitive way that in a previous life you were such, or is he just comparing him, and so on? So, there are different opinions. Some say he's Vishaka, some say he's Lalita, some say he's Arjuniya, and he's a particularly interesting one. In that regard. Then you have also some, century or so later, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur wrote a book just like Kavi Karnapur's, Gauranga something. I have it here. I forget. But he goes through all the associates in Gaur Leela, a great number of them, and says who they are in Krishna Leela, and he has different opinions about some from Kavi Karnapur. So that's the first point. To say that Madhavendra Puri is a Kalpavriksha, I believe is more to say that he is a wish-fulfilling devotee who is bringing the teaching of Mahaprabhu, in a sampradaya. The ideas of Mahaprabhu, that what he's about, is not something that was unknown entirely, but to make it well known and clearly known and distributed in a systematic way. That's what a sampradaya does, and Madhavendra Puri has a significant role in that regard. It's that said, it's obvious from the lament near the time of his passing that is related in Chaitanya Charitamrita that his ideal is Madhurya Rasa. Now, the creepers are often in Braj identified with Madhurya Rasa. As far as a Kalpavriksha, wish-fulfilling tree, I don't remember what they might be identified with per se, but he's definitely a Madhurya Rasa Bhakt, and you could tell from his aspiration there. He's Yidina Dayadanatha. He's feeling separation from Krishna in the mood of the gopis. So he's in Gopi Bhav. And to say that he's a Kalpavriksha is to say, well, I don't know particularly what gopi is, but he's in Gopi Bhav and he's a Kalpavriksha. He's everything, all your wishes can be fulfilled, for the highest ideal, through him and the sampradaya that he is, the kind of the we would say Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was the founder, but he took initiation from Ishvara Puri, from Madhavendra Puri. So kind of he's the founder in that sense. Does that help?
It does. I guess the follow-up would be then in Vraj, then do trees have a rasa besides a Shanta ras, or they actually could be in a different.
But like I said, the vines are thought to all be in
Right.
in Madhurya Rasa. The hills are thought to be in Sakya Rasa. The cows in Vatsalya Rasa. Trees, they're thought to be, and Krishna himself speaks about it in the chapter where the Brahman's wives are given in Mathura, given a blessing. So there's a nice section there where Krishna speaks about the virtues of trees. They're giving nature, how they provide. In Shikshastakam, we find the example of the tree as a provider, as a tolerant, and his tolerance reaches the point of even providing for people who are chopping him down, giving them shade, giving that person shade even when they do so, and so forth. So givers is the idea. I don't remember, and I think I said this earlier, I don't remember what anybody has said other than that about the trees are in this rasa, that we don't, but that there have been things said, as I say, about vines and flowers and hills and so forth. And these are kind of feelings from advanced devotees. Bhaktisiddhanta gave us some different perspective on some of the so-called inanimate objects, if you will, which aren't inanimate, but in Braj, than Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. So there have been feelings that may come in devotees, and there may be a place for looking at that in from different angles of vision. Trees of Braj, Ki Jai.
Vijay. Okay, Shamasundar, it looks like you have another question. Is that?
So the question is about the fifth note of Krishna's flute, and whether I can say anything about other notes in Krishna's flute. Yes. Of course, Um, hmm, I would say that Krishna's playing many notes, different ragas. Um, his flute playing is described as being different from any other flute player. Um, so it's not ordinary fluting, if you will. Even when he plays the ragas appropriate for different times and so on and so forth. There's an idea in Indian music that, as it is, I suppose, in all schools of music, that music has, corresponds with emotions and moods, and so there's music for this mood or music for that mood and so forth. But it's really seems to be extended in Indian classical music, and so expertise in classical Indian music, perfecting raga, is thought to be able to bring about certain transformations within nature, like the Malara raga, Megha Malara, it's sometimes called. Megha means cloud. It's thought that if it's played right, it can cause rain. So, of course, when Krishna plays it, then everyone weeps, and the trees exude honey, and so on and so forth. His expertise, I want to say, in playing the flute exceeds anything that anybody's ever heard, even amongst the Devas and the Gandharvas, and so on. The fifth note, prema, Panchamaswara, the perfect fifth. That's something that is understood also in Western music. But the fifth note of Krishna's flute is identified with hasya and madhurya rasas. And the whole of Krishna Lila, in one sense, is a romantic comedy. If you study it carefully, you could put it in that genre, the joking amongst the cowherds and the gopis, and all the play for love, and all the interlude interaction between gopis and Krishna and his intimate friends and so forth, the back and forth and all. It's all the play and humorous, full of subtle joking and so on and so forth, in and around the pursuit of Madhurya between Radha and Krishna, and for the union of Radha and Krishna. So, the fifth note has perhaps been singled out for that reason. As far as the other single notes, I think it is mentioned somewhere that different notes had different effects on, for example, the water and the land, which would change places. The land would move like water, and the water would be still like the land. Another note would affect the cows and so forth. But I can't remember exactly where that has been written, but I think that I just want to say that, and this is what I'm trying to say, that Krishna's not just playing one note. within the context of, putting so many notes together in a rag. And there are ragas, for union, for separation, for things outside of romantic life directly, and so on and so forth. So Krishna's playing in different ways, in different circumstances, in different situations, affects different devotees in different ways, and you have to go there to hear him. It's beyond explanation. I think I've written something about this. Let me see if I can find it for you. Here's something about trees. I didn't, but no. That's my thoughts on that for the moment. I hope that's helpful. Couldn't find what I was looking for there to read something to you. I wrote a chapter with a large section about Krishna's flute, but I didn't find it. I can look again. Might be nice to read. Let me see here. No, we better go on to the next question.
Okay, Sharda I'm not sure if this is a question that she was asking for you, or she said it's a general question on the chat. Sharda, can you unmute yourself? Would you be able to?
Haribol, Hare
Haribol.
Krishna,
Hello.
Pranam Maharaj. It's just a general question, I think, because in one of the classes of the Sunday feast classes in Sharanagati community, I'm in England, but apparently there they talked about, the Lord being a supreme person and talking to him and seeing him. And there's just a general question about that, conversing with him in your mind or whatever. Some of the devotees says, oh, you can't see the Lord until you go to his abode. So, it's just a general, question. If you can say something for, my husband was asking about this, and, he's in a kind of like a, an earlier stage of, of knowledge about all of this. So, yeah, if you could say anything about that, I'd be very grateful. So I could tell
About
talking to Krishna or conversing with Krishna, whether it's in your mind or whether you can do, he used to be a Christian, he was a Christian for 40 years. And so,
I see, right.
You see what I mean?
Yeah.
It's this, comparative kind of thing with Christianity or other faiths, really.
Yeah. Pramod Puri Goswami Maharaj, who had the opportunity to serve, he used to every night tell Krishna everything that he did. I did this today, I did that today, I did this today, I did that today.
Yeah.
So there's some place for that. Of course, you can't see Krishna with material eyes and experiencing with material senses, but we can spiritualize our senses by bringing our senses in touch with sense objects and then using those sense objects for the pleasure of Krishna. That will cause them to take on a spiritual quality by which we can then have a greater perception of Krishna. For example, without doing that, we may look at the deity and just think it's a stone. But if we do that, we may start to have some feeling for the deity, feel the presence of Krishna there, and talk to him. So in the form of the deity, Krishna is present for those who can't experience him internally. Now, you don't have to go to Goloka to talk with him internally, but you have to go truly internal, which in order to do, there's a process. So that's what differentiates then this internal talking with God, so to speak, in our tradition from some other traditions where they don't have a method for actually withdrawing from the world of ordinary perception, interacting with desires in relation to it, and so on and so forth. So through the spiritual practice, gradually our desires for the external world start to wane because we're starting to get some inner tangible experience that corresponds with what the scriptures say we should experience. And that bliss, that encouragement, that abhas, shadow of actual bhava is very encouraging, very confirming for the devotee. So as he or she progresses, they're actually turning, he or she's actually turned, the sadhaka is turning away from the outer world, and their consciousness is turning inward. And as it does in higher stages of bhakti in this life, then they can have the darshan of Krishna internally in a meditative realm, if you will. And then that's for, I say, more devotees who are more adept. Prior to that, however, the archan, deity worship, is there to help devotees who are still preoccupied, who aren't contemplatives, or so are still preoccupied with the world of sense objects. The deity affords us the opportunity to be in touch with sense objects. If you want to go shopping, go. You can go to, Bloomingdale's and shop for Krishna. Shop your heart out, buy a, nice books for him or something, whatever. So, this is very, I want to say, like user friendly, as I'm talking about it. And then the deity is really the heart of a great devotee who establishes a temple, or under whose auspices a temple has been established, and that the deity of his heart is there on the altar for the students who can't access him within their heart yet, because their heart has other things in it, cluttering it, other desires and so forth. So here the deity is taken the throne, and the students are able to worship him there in a way that simultaneously takes things out of the heart that are cluttering it. So you begin to see the deity as not just a stone, and treat him not just like a stone. He starts to reciprocate in that way. And then from external service in this way, internal service and experience can be derived. And so in higher stages of bhakti, like in Bhava Bhakti, for example, then you could say he's having a conversation with God. There are books like Conversations with God, out there, popular books and so forth. Those, I wouldn't take those very seriously. Those are quite problematic.
Yeah.
So if you're going to have a conversation with God, then you have to be pretty interested to get his attention, right? And so we have a practice for that. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Hare Krishna.
In regards to your husband.
Thank you. Thank you, Dobal.
Swami, I have a quick question. Could I ask before you leave us? You mentioned that you were involved with a bit of a controversy if it's helpful in any way, is that controversy available for us online to review somewhere?
You could ask Dulal Chandra about it. I wasn't online for it, but Dulal Chandra was. I don't think it went too far. It was rather acrimonious. So, but Dulal, you can write to him if he has anything to forward to you. But there's not much to be said. I mean, in opposition to the point. The point we are making simply is that in places and at times, Bhaktivinoda Thakur said that bhakti was inherent and that the jiva has a swarup that's inherent. In other places, he said the opposite. And so, well, there's a point right there. What's he saying? And then if we look back previous to him, to the founding acharyas, we find consistently that, and for good philosophical reasons, bhakti is not inherent in the jiva. Bhakti is not a right, but a blessing, and so on. Then you're left with, well, in some places, Bhaktivinoda Thakur said it like Jiva Goswami. In some places, he said it different. Why he said it different, we don't know. We could give a conjecture about that. Maybe that as a preaching strategy. People don't like the idea sometimes that Bhaktivinoda or Prabhupada or some current acharya or any acharya at any time had a preaching strategy, and they often respond like, "Oh, you're saying he lied to us." No, we're saying he had a preaching strategy. You can look in Bhaktivinoda Thakur's books and how he wrote Jaiva Dharma in Bengali for the Hindu and Muslim Bengali population, and how he wrote Chaitanya Shikshamrita in English for English-speaking people. And you can see that he has preaching strategies in there. For example, if anyone would have a preaching strategy in the modern times, it would be Bhaktivinoda. Look at his was that famous book, Krishna Samhita. I mean, it's a whole preaching strategy. How he explains, Ram Leela, and Hanuman and the monkeys in terms of contemporary thought, and he acknowledges the Bhagavatam maybe have written in the 6th century in South India. That's a possibility, and if so, we think of it like this, and all kinds of things that he dealt with. So it's reasonable to make the conjecture that maybe that's why he did that in certain places. Maybe not. Maybe there's another explanation. I haven't heard one that is even been offered. But that's really a moot point. The point only is, what did the Goswamis say? Let's say Jiva Goswami, the Tattva Acharya of Gaudiya Vaishnavism. He's written this Paramatma Sandarbha, several sections about the nature of the jiva, and it's very clear that the bhakti, which is constituted of Krishna Swarup Shakti, is not a part of the constitution of the jiva. The jiva is, now, one of the things that I was told came up in this was that's one reaction. Oh, it's a preaching strategy. We don't like that. But I mean, I just addressed that. The other thing was, somebody said, I think it was this Urmila, I think you know her, God sister of yours, ours, that she didn't want to read Padmanabhamar's books because it was a non-controversy, because both things are true. Okay. And she said that she read a paper by somebody named Gopinath Acharya, that scholar that hasn't been published, that demonstrated that. So which was what I didn't appreciate. That was sent to me by Dulal. I think I didn't really appreciate it. I mean, you chose to read somebody's paper on it, and you chose not to read somebody else's paper on it. And you reached a conclusion. So Maharaj's conclusion is different. Maybe you should consider it. But she went on to say that if you don't say that bhakti is inherent, and I think what she meant was, if you don't say that each jiva has a particular inclination towards a particular rasa, then you're promoting impersonalism. And nothing could be farther from the truth. The interesting thing in this regard is that Jiva Goswami's entire analysis of the jiva from one vantage point is for the explicit purpose of distinguishing his understanding of the Atma from that of Shankar, who's the classical impersonalist. Shankar says there is no delimited jiva or no jiva with boundaries. It's different from another jiva that eternally exists. He says there's only Brahman. And the idea of the jiva is like if you take sky and you put it in an earthen pot, it's the sky in the earthen pot. Just break the earthen pot and you see there's no, the individuality doesn't exist. There's the duality of two. Doesn't exist. There's only Brahman. Now we don't agree with that. And Jiva Goswami's whole argument is in one sense against that, right? At the same time, however, it's very clear throughout all the scriptures that the jiva, the Atma, let's say the Atma, is like Brahman. There's a likeness between Atma and Brahman. That's just a fact. What is Brahman? Brahman is the feature of Godhead without Vishesh, without qualities, without particulars. When you bring in the Swarup Shakti, then Brahman has qualities, form, leelas, and so forth. So so the jiva is similar. Her argument seemed to be that, well, it's impersonal because you're saying the jiva is not a person. The jiva doesn't have to have a particular inclination towards one rasa or another, which would make each jiva, inherently dasya rasa jivas, sakya rasa jivas, madhurya rasa jivas, which would bring into question the whole gift of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the blessing. Obviously, people are, and it would make God partial if the jivas come from God. Some have, Vaikuntha Swarups, some have Goloka, Dwarka. Why did he choose like this? So we say he's impartial. The jivas come from Paramatma. Paramatma is characterized by impartiality, whereas Bhagavan is characterized by partiality towards his devotees. The witness, Paramatma, equal. So Brahman, Paramatma, jiva is more like Brahman. But it doesn't have to have a particular spiritual inclination to be, if you want to use the term, a person. It has personhood potential. And you cannot evaluate a thing or an entity independent of its potential. So the jiva is dynamic. Its characteristic is adaptability. It can adapt to the material environment. It can adapt to the spiritual environment. What does that adaptation mean? Well, it means it develops because it has will. It can will in relation to either environment. If it has no environment to will in relation to, then it's just going to be still. If you don't offer me any choices, what's the point of how can I exercise my will? So the jiva, independent of either of these environments, we say it has will, and the exercise of it is what makes differences. So if you don't have an environment that offers you choices, well, you don't exercise your will, so to speak. Of course, we do, for that matter. So for time without beginning on Adi Karma, we've been making choices. So we've always been different in that sense. But the jiva has a sense of I am. I pointed out and I think Dulal published it on the thread, that, as I've said in many classes, I am this and I am that. That's all an illusion. This and that all fades away. But in all of the I am this or I am that, I am American, I am Indian, I'm black, I'm white, I'm a man, woman, all those things disappear, but I am is constant throughout. So the jiva has a sense of I am. And that I am is bigger than the entire personhood of material life. You're not going away from to something smaller or something less. You're going to something bigger. I am, I exist, I'm eternal. I don't die. I am. That is so big that people can rest in that eternally. The bliss of the Atma, Atmaram. Well, this is the whole basis of the Bhagavatam. Sukadeva was Atmaram. He was taking pleasure in the self, and he had no desire, therefore, to interact with anything in the world and to take pleasure from. He had no desire. He had no desire. He was self-satisfied. That's what it means, self-satisfied. No desire, no want for anything. Is that making him less of a person? That's making him more full of a person. The person who wants less is more full, more complete. If you have no wants, no desires, you're more complete. Now, the interesting thing, of course, about Sukadeva, which is central to the whole Bhagavatam, in that state of being more by having less, less is more. He didn't become less of a person. He became more of a person. His personhood was vacuous in relation to, material misidentification. He was here today and gone tomorrow. He came to the stable position of his actual reality. I am. That's what exists. I exist. I am. This and that will come and go. I can't take it seriously. I am. And that, the bliss of the Atma, compared to all the enjoyment of material life put together, exceeds it exponentially, if you will. So he could just sit and be. This is like a goal for people to become like that. Doesn't mean you're becoming an impersonalist, but he was living in the self. The self is comparable, to Brahman. He was a Jivan Mukta. He hadn't entered into Brahman. And then what happened? He heard the Bhagavatam from outside of himself. Poems of the Bhagavatam came to him through the agency of Vyas, who sent them. And then as a result of that ingress of bhakti, now you have the ingress of the Swarup Shakti rather than the Maya Shakti. And then a personhood came out on that side, which is, of course, permanent and enduring and is the very expression, Prem Swarup, the expression of love. So to say that the jiva, unless it has an inherent spiritual desire that's somehow dormant, therefore it's not a person, and you're making him personal, no, that's not the case at all. It has all the ingredients because it exists, it's conscious rather than inert. Jiva Goswami says, Ekarup Swarupa Bhak. It has a form, which means it actually exists independently from other jivas. It's delimited. Delimited means it has boundaries. And what are the boundaries? Well, the scriptures say it's 1/10,000th the size of the tip of a hair. What is meant by that? What's meant by that is, in those times, you could not dissect a tip of a hair 10,000 times. That would be impossible. You might be able to do that today with modern instruments and so forth. And you could say, there's the size of the jiva. We'd say, no. The scripture is, in its time, is saying 10,000 the size of the tip of a hair means you can't, it's like a point What are the dimensions of a point? There are no dimensions to a point. But if you, mathematically speaking, if you put a point next to another point and another one, you've got a line, and that has dimensions. That's mystical. Right? Points have no dimensions, but if you put them together, there's a line and it has dimensions, length, width, breadth, and so forth. So the jiva is like a point. And there are other points. So it's delimited. Ekarup, Swarupa, Swarupyabhak. Ekarup, Swarupabhak. Swarupabhak means, and it has a nature. Here the word Swarup means nature. And its nature is Chidanandatmika, that it's of the nature of knowledge, consciousness. It's of the nature of consciousness and bliss, such as its nature. And it is kartritva, bhoktritva, gnatritva. So it has the capacity to be an agent, action, influence, that means its will. Kartritva, bhoktritva means, gnatritva means it has the capacity to know. It's not inert. And bhoktritva means it has the capacity for qualitative experiences, to experience qualitatively. That's very rich. That's all inherent in the jiva. But it needs an environment, obviously, to express those things. So you have the material environment, you have the spiritual environment, and the adaptability of the jiva to one or the other. It's kind of a moot point in a sense to say, well, what is the jiva independent of the two shakti? Because it's not independent of them. It's either one side or the other. And we say metaphorically, sort of poetically, that if it merges in Brahman, it's from the bhakti point of view, that spiritual suicide doesn't exist. I mean, it does, but in terms of experience, its potential to express will, to have qualitative experiences. So, well, that's lacking, to say the least. So if you really carefully study what Jiva Goswami says are the inherent qualities of the jiva, you could never, you would be wrong to say that unless it has an inherent spiritual desire, then it's not a person. No, it has a capacity for loving Krishna. Now you might ask the question further, well, if the spiritual personality is eternal, then it has to be there forever. It can't have a beginning at some point. But of course, the nature, what is being taught in the scriptures is that Nityasiddha Krishna Prem. Krishna Prem, the bhavas that make up Prem, they're eternal. So Sakya Bhava is eternal. Madhurya Prem is eternal. Vatsalya Prem is eternal. They're eternal. If they weren't eternal, and what can you say? Krishna wouldn't be eternally the son of Yashoda. Wouldn't eternally be the friend of Sridham. He is. So those bhavas are eternal, and there are personifications of them that are his associates. And he is the object that of the love that they are. So they go together. You can't have one without the other. If you're going to have Krishna as a person, in his human life form, and he has to have these associates that that he's that who personify the love that he's the object of. They are the personifications of the Swarup Shakti that are causing qualities, so to speak, to come out of Brahman. And what that Swarup Shakti does is eternally express itself in newer and newer ways for the pleasure of Krishna. So here's a question. Does Krishna have newer and newer leelas? Yes. How can they be eternal? If he has a new leela, how can it be eternal? Because it's happening in the eternal presence. So in Golok, there's eternal presence. In the spiritual world, there's eternal presence. And the Swarup Shakti is eternally expressing itself in newer and newer ways for the pleasure of Krishna. And you are one of those ways. And there will be Leelas also. New Leelas. And you'll be a new member and so forth. But because the Bhava is eternal, a particular expression of it maybe have not been expressed in eternal time, but is at a certain point. I mean, it's kind of hard to talk about it, obviously. It's beyond time. There's a sense of time in Goloka, even though it's time after time, if you will. It's been sung about. So that's some thoughts came out. I hope that's of interest to you and helpful. And you all may have some place where he could direct you or some things he could send you. Does that help?
Yes, thank you. Wow, it was just brilliant, the 2 points you made. One being that the jiva is often referred to as like Brahman, and that whole understanding was very interesting. And then secondly, how Shukadev in his Atmarama position was influenced by Bhagavatam, by bhakti that way. Both points were just brilliant. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for asking. Glad to be helpful. Okay, nice to talk with you all. We've gone a little over time, but
Yes, thank you so
your
much.
fault. It's your fault.
It's Pranada's fault. Yes, we can blame
See
it
you
on
next week. Bye.
Jai, Jai, Guru Maharaj, Hare Krishna. Okay, just quickly for any devotees that want to stay on just for a second to hear about the Tattva Vivek classes for coming up. We have some new people in here. So on Monday, we have the Brahmara Gita, Pamanava Swami continuing that. Tuesday, we have Shamasundar Das is doing the importance and implication of prayer. And Wednesday, we have Dulal Chandra continuing his Krishna Sandarbhas. On Thursday, I'm continuing to do the interviews, the beauty and messiness of a sadhaka's journey. And then on Fridays, we have Rigupad doing Patanjali Yoga Sutras, an overview for devotees. And on Saturdays, we have Kanuram doing the Masters, the Gurus of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And then Sundays, we're back here with questions and answers. So,
Archana,
yes.
that is you were reading next month's schedule.
Oh, this is next month's schedule. Oh,
Sorry.
thank you. Okay, so everybody, that's the schedule for next month. So I don't have this month anymore. Yeah. So I guess you'll have to go on Tattva Vivek and see what the classes are but every day at 11:30 Eastern Daylight Savings Time, we have a class. So you can tune in and see what's going on because they're all really good. And yeah, it's just really wonderful to hear from all of our wonderful devotees in the Sangha. So thank you very much. And we'll see everybody soon. Hare Krishna.
Hare
Haribol.
Krishna.
Hare
Haribol.
Bo.